Grazie mille per l'invito, è un vero piacere essere qui su questo tema caldissimo, come sapete. L'agentic AI è il grande tema di cui tutti parlano, il shift nei pattern di ricerca della discovery è sicuramente un tema che potrà avere, probabilmente ha già delle enormi implicazioni economiche sul funzionamento degli e-commerce come li conosciamo, dunque come affrontare l'argomento, un tema fondamentale per in un certo senso riportare a rilanciare anche gli e-commerce del lusso che in questo momento sono un pochino lì che arrancano, no? I brand tra di voi non vedo nessuno di fare così, dunque probabilmente annuite, but it's a particular pleasure to moderate the first discussion, and discussion is with the founder of formerly Dressipy, the company formerly known as Dressipy, which has now been included in Map Fashion, which is Sarah McVittie. Welcome.
Hello.
A warm welcome. And it's a privilege to have you here. And actually, Sarah not only invented this brilliant piece of software and of categorizing content, of generating and integrating content that is really helpful, like James described so effectively just a couple of minutes ago. But Sarah also conducted a little bit of research into 119 retailers and fashion brands across the UK and internationally. And Sarah kindly is going to walk us through a couple of key findings and about the state of health of the fashion industry, what can be done about it. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Piacere. Thank you very much for having me. So a bit of background. So I started my career as a banker at UBS, so I have a horrible fascination with data and analysis, so apologies. But what I wanted to do, I mean, in the UK, fashion is going through a pretty difficult time. It's not a very happy market at the moment. So I wanted to conduct some research that helped me to really understand what was driving, what models were really winning in the market. So I took the top 119 quoted fashion stocks from Europe, the UK, and the US. And I looked at their data from 2019 through to 2025, the interim July results. And I looked at all the guardrails around the P&L data, the cash flow, and the balance sheet data. So this is really the output of that. So, those are just a snapshot of the retailers that went into the report. But rather than just look at sales growth and EBIT growth, I wanted to dig a bit deeper into health. What is a good operating business? So we looked at free cash flow, we looked at cash conversion, we looked at working capital improvement. In the UK, I mean, there's everything taking longer to turn around, that's less cash in the business. So that was the kind of guardrails that we put in place. And obviously not a very pretty picture. So of those 13 retailers, there is some revenue growth, but actually, if you dig deep into those markets, what you find is that in the UK, Arcadia, Topshop went bust, Debenhams went bust, House of Fraser went bust. So that 20% growth is predominantly picking up the sales for those businesses that went bust during COVID. So there is some gross margin positive gain, but everything else is looking pretty ropey. So operating margin is down 2.9 percentage points. That's about 30% decline in EBIT margins. So you went from having 10%, 1 in 10 with negative margins, to 1 in 5. So 20% of those 113 with negative net margins. You're taking 3 days longer to turn your cash and your inventory, and then you've got your debt and your leverage up by 8% as well. So it just means there's a big issue around the profitability, and there's a big cash crisis in fashion. So when you look at it, I've broken it. I mean, you can download the report, and I'm very happy to share the raw data as well. If anyone wants the raw data to do your own analysis, I'm very happy to send it over. So please let me know. But what you then see, this is taking the H1 numbers into account, but obviously luxury up to 2024, doing very well, same with sportswear. But actually when you take the H1 interim results in, then luxury's having a bit of a tougher time with that. Value is doing okay. You've obviously got mass market is very different and very much a case-by-case basis. And then going into the top 10. But actually what's interesting, when you look at the top performers and you look at the consistent pieces around them, I'll just go on to, I'm going to flick through this very quickly, then I think we're going to have a conversation around this. But so what was interesting here, I compared the fashion index, so that's the top 50 in that fashion index, against the consumer discretionary index, and it's way below where it needs to be. And mostly that's because there's a big difference between the top 25% and the bottom 25%, 60 percentage points. So that's all around operations. That's all around the operating models that exist. So one of the key things that I thought was really interesting, the top 10% there, you've had a 19% improvement in EBITDA. You've got 19% more free cash flow. And you're turning your stock round. So the guardrails some of these businesses have put in place to turn their cash and put more cash back into the business or turn their stock is phenomenal. Whereas the bottom one's obviously much worse. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go, and that's interesting. So you've got the EBIT margin gain there, and then on the bottom you've got the change in working capital days. Then you want to be negative. So you want to be in the top right-hand corner there. But you can see we've mapped every single business across all of those metrics. And again, we've got an interactive report, so you can download it, you can play with the data, and again, feel free to ask me to send you the spreadsheet. But, I mean, Marc, what are you seeing here in Italy? I'm interested to see how this translates to where you are.
Well, it's a rather sobering picture, which you just described before, but it's at least encouraging to see that among the top 10, there's 2 Italian companies, among the top winners worldwide. So I think that's nice. Of course, we'd like to see more. So we're open to explore what are the success factors that actually drive those distinctive companies. And yes, it does resonate. I mean, the situation in Italy is similar to what you're describing, and so I'm curious about what you see.
Yeah, and it's interesting in luxury, actually. So in the UK, it's not so much of a luxury market, it's more of the mass market. But actually, there's a big, really having a point of difference, and I think really making the brand stand out and being different. And in the UK, we call it the dangerous middle ground, where there's lots of people in the middle, and everybody it's a bit like your AI slop, everyone kind of hangs around the middle. And actually, that bifurcation seems to be here in luxury as well. But what's even more interesting, we've got 20 businesses in the luxury segment, but 4 of them are responsible for 70% of the EBIT margin, which I thought, so that's 4 of them versus 16 on the EBIT margin, which I thought was very interesting as well. So looking at what's driving that value, obviously the clienteling is key. And then, sorry, I'm just going to go quite quickly. But in terms of the resale, I think this is another interesting area. So resale is growing phenomenally fast. In the UK now, 1 in 4 purchases are second-hand purchases. So even though it's an uncomfortable discussion, perhaps, it's one I think we need to address. But also, I was always very skeptical of resale and thought there's no way it's going to make money. However, both the Real and ThreadUp and Vinted is incredibly profitable. So I know it's uncomfortable, but I think there's a conversation that we need to think about. How do we own some of this market, and how do we own some of this revenue? But yeah, I mean, interesting that they are all driving good profit there as well. And what's interesting about Vinted is they keep the cash in the model and they keep it going around within the business. So, I mean, how does this feel? Is this an area that's of interest in Italy?
Well, it's interesting. It looks like after you invented a piece of very useful software, you're also trying to reinvent the industry. So that's interesting. So yes. So where do you see the drivers? There's a huge difference among those who actually generate cash, are able to express high margins, and then to some extent have a continuous relationship with the consumer. So what is it that today makes you resilient? What is it that you learned out of all of those?
So of all the things we look at, so again, so I think there's a few different models. So a lot of it around real discipline in how you launch products, when you launch them, making sure that you keep that pricing power. I mean, so if you go, obviously, Hermes with that scarcity is key, but it's keeping control of that. But if you look at Dillard's, this is a US department store. So they improved their EBIT margin by 9 points. They were negative beforehand. So this is an amazing example. But they've just got, they use their store, their clienteling is how they do a lot of their CRM. They do a lot of work in terms of how they use their own brand for those high, so those kind of inventory discipline around how they use and develop their own brand to get the margin for those capsule exclusive events. So there's lots around the discipline and the guardrails you put in place to make sure that even things like returns, making sure the returns get straight back into the system so that you are your operating cash flow is there for everybody.
So it sounds like it's a lot about control, is it? I mean, the first slide you said it's vertically controlled, distribution model, DTC model, a mess
Absolutely.
you don't find in wholesale at all. And Prada actually, the last 15 years, they slashed their whole wholesale distribution down to virtually nothing. And not surprisingly, the top of the heap, right?
Yeah.
So is it about that? Is it about controlling every touch point? Because as you said, there's a lot of new touch points, like the resale, operations, and so on, that are entering and successfully the market. So do you have to increase your control of what you do?
I think there's the consumer doesn't really care whether they interact, how they interact with it, or how they find you. But I think as a brand, yes, you need to understand what those guardrails look like and where you are able to have control and where you're able to leverage that control. I think that's the key thing that makes the difference. I mean, Decoded is another example, not in luxury, but obviously this is a shoe-wear brand, and they've really thought about how they release their sneakers. They have this dual lane supply chain, so they have their nearshoring, their offshoring, and they're very, very disciplined about how they release those products. So it's much less around discounting, a lot less around the wholesaling, but they have very strict guardrails around how they do that. And again, you can see that they've improved their working capital days by 15 days, which is huge, right? So I think there's something around that control, which is understanding what you can leverage and where you are not in control, that I think is key. And when you've got those iconic products, keeping them for your shop-in-shop or keeping them where you have got control over how those are delivered, I suppose.
And you actually showed a chart where you said that the middle market, the players are stuck in the middle, the trap in the middle. Yeah. That's very dangerous. Why is it, and what can be done against it?
So I think we see this a lot in the UK, where I think an example I often give is kind of marketing, brand marketing. So 20 years ago, 20% was paid marketing and 80% was brand marketing. It's now the other way. It's 80% paid and 20% brand. But what that means is that although it makes sense because it's an ROI and you can see it and it feels efficient, but actually the brand DNA is not coming across. Like, why are you different? Why, if you went away tomorrow, why would I care? Would I care that you aren't there anymore? So I think understanding how do you, like if you take like Uniqlo, they have managed to differentiate themselves with fabrication, with the technical fabrication of what they do. Zara is known for fashion, ability, and style. So what is it? What's the point of difference? Because I think otherwise, it's just no one really, if the brand doesn't stand for anything, then you don't know, no one really cares whether you are here or not. So I think it's that point of difference. And wherever you sit on the value chain, making sure that there's a reason why people come back to buy your brand and the reason why they love what you do and what that brand DNA stands for.
And you also mentioned, I think, operational execution, right? I mean, it's not only about capturing the consumer in new ways, in compelling ways, in consistent ways, because if you control everything, of course, you are consistent. And we learned, I think, from Maurizio's presentation before that there obviously is a problem, and I think Meta also showed it very effectively, that there is a problem that, consumers don't perceive your brand as being consistent across touch points, right? So, well, you first have to be consistent, and how do you structure operations to, uphold that consistency, and how do you then serve the market in that very consistent way that you're promising with your marketing?
Yeah, and I think this is, that consistency of experience across every channel, and I think particularly So if you take luxury where, a lot of it still happens in store, but a lot of that happens in clienteling, that same consistent, gorgeous experience and, making sure that is, if you've got your store staff there in store and then they know everything, they can actually serve those customers from the store and actually make sure that you know what they bought previously. They bought that gorgeous jacket last season, and actually this season, that gorgeous jacket is going to go with these other pieces here. So I think making that consistent experience, so wherever he or she is shopping with your brand, they are well understood. You definitely get them. They understand that you know who they are, and you understand that they will serve you in this beautiful, consistent way wherever you are shopping with them. But I think that is key. But the operational piece is fascinating. I've got a whole extra piece on that, but I won't bore you with that today. But yeah, there's some guardrails that I think are really interesting in that.
And actually, the picture that you're painting is actually the state of fashion even before AI hit the marketplace with the amazingly quick adoption rates, which I think the like of which we've never seen before. Remember the adoption rate of the iPhone, which has been very disruptive. I still remember people saying, well, that's 10% of traffic. And actually that traffic converts less. It's just 2% of sales. So let's not worry about it. And 2 years later, 70%, 75% of traffic, converting traffic, came out of mobile devices, of course, not only also the competitors, but mainly also Apple, especially in luxury. And here with AI, we're seeing a conversion curve, which is massively quicker, like even we faster. Just saw in the presentation, right? So how does this pay into this picture, and how does it even further change the success factors that you need to excel at?
So what I think is really interesting about ChatGPT and all of these LLMs, it makes us more human. I think Google taught us to search with black dress wedding, and now we can say, I've got a wedding in Rome, it's on a roof terrace, it's, and I can ask these questions in this really human way. And so I think what's important is, I've been banging on about data for a long time, but your data is it's the foundations on which you can build your house, right? So the data that you apply across your business needs to be consistent everywhere. So AI is only as good as the data that's going in, and there's kind of garbage in, garbage out. So I think understanding what your data play is, what your data house needs to look like, and then how that plays into every part of your product life cycle, whether that's the supply chain, the manufacturing, and how do you capture that essence of your brand in that data, because that's what the LLMs are going to be reading. That's what, understanding that people buy that jacket with that neckline and that lapel for these reasons. And actually, when you put the human language on top, you can see exactly that's why they get bought in those sizes and not those sizes. That's why this region behaves differently, because when you see it as a customer see it, you get a much cleaner picture. So you have no more overproduction. You have this very, very consistent way and very clean supply chain. So it's the whole way through that product life cycle that it makes a huge difference. So I would start, and I think Shein, as much as we all love to hate them, have proven how powerful that data play can be the whole way through. I've got a little case study in the report, but looking at and what we can learn from this business where they have this amazing, so they create the data right at the beginning, then as they are trading through, they are adapting and updating their data on the product to conform with those micro trends. So there's so many learnings that I think we can take, but really having a clear data strategy that you have, and you've thought about it the whole way through, I think is really important. It makes a big difference.
Excellent, very, very interesting. And I say, the state of the industry is stressed, and we could say it will be stressed more, but we could also say
it's an opportunity.
One of the reasons that it's stressed, probably this wave is already, coming over us, and we haven't seen it yet. So I think it's probably a very, very strong reason for starting to learn how to interact with the consumer in new ways, and it's probably no way we can imagine interacting with the consumer without catching them on the AI chatbots, basically.
And actually,
right?
none of us know, right? So none of us really know what's coming next, but what we do know is that it will be fueled by this data play, and actually just being so mindful that there are, however we are choosing to interact with each of our favorite brands, that we need to be able to, and it makes it more complex as well, because you need to do more contact formats. It's proliferation of different ways of delivering the content and different ways of doing things. But it becomes a very exciting opportunity, I think, to really connect with the customers as well.
Well, great. Thank you, Sarah. And Sarah brought a present. This is you can download the full research here behind the QR code. So feel free to scan it, and I think the MAP Fashion team will be happy also to share it with you in case, somehow you
And
don't do it now.
Any data geeks who want the actual raw data file, and happily send it to you as well. So
Perfect. Thank you. Sarah McVittie.